Welcome back to the Do Bash. This week we're coming to you. We're going to talk about our favorite Nintendo games. For starters, I got a little story I want to talk about. I can remember the first time I ever played a Nintendo Entertainment System. It was on Christmas Day, probably 1987. I remember I woke up and I don't know what I did, but I ended up over at my friend Mitchell's house. And we'd been playing Atari a lot, and that's what we were used to, was playing Yar's Revenge and Pac-Man and all that good stuff. Well, somehow I ended up at his house on Christmas morning one time, and he had this little gray box sitting there, and he said, "Hey, this is a new video game system." And I was like, "No way, bro." And so we sat down, and he put in the game Top Gun. And I remember when he pressed power on that thing, and I actually seen a jet that didn't look like just a bunch of globs on the screen. I was just floored, man. That was my first experience ever playing Nintendo, and I'll never forget it.
So that was actually one of my first questions was what your first Nintendo experience was. Now, I remember playing a Top Gun. Our cousin, Alan or Andy, whichever one it was, Travis, but they had Top Gun over at their house. And it was the first mission that you play, you're having to land that plane. And that was the hardest thing for me to do. I almost never did figure that out.
Oh, yeah, it was killer, man. That was one thing everybody loved, was trying to land that stinking plane on that aircraft carrier. It was like the hardest thing you could ever think of,
But that was actually not that particular game, but that was actually my first introduction to Nintendo. See, I didn't have a Nintendo until probably 1987, 1988. It had already been out for a few years before then. And we had gone over to my Aunt Carol's house, and her sons were Alan and Andy. That's mine and Travis's cousins. But they were about 10, 11 years older than what me and Travis was. And me and my brother went over there. And the first time that I ever saw Mario, and it was the first game that I ever saw, was Super Mario Brothers. I'm just like you. I was floored. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And I begged my mom and dad to get one for me. And it was either the Christmas of 1987 or the Christmas of 1988. I can't remember exactly what year, but we ended up with the NES. We opened it up and we had the Zapper. We had 2 controllers. We had Super Mario World and we had Duck Hunt.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt, what was your first game you ever played on the Nintendo?
See, well, my family was broke, so we didn't have really much Christmas. Our Christmas came during tax season.
Yeah, so baby, praise God.
When Dad got his tax return, that's when I got my Nintendo. Probably, I want to say it was like 1990. And the first 2 games that I got was Ghostbusters and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And I remember playing those. And I was like, man, Ghostbusters was so hard. And Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was so hard. But those were the first 2. Aside from Mario and Duck Hunt, that was out because that came with it. But those were the 2 games that he got me. And I think he'd gotten those like at a pawn shop or something. So that's how I got my Nintendo. I don't even think the Nintendo was new. I don't remember seeing a box with it. So
the Super Nintendo was probably getting ready to come out.
Yeah, I think it was actually. So.
What about you, Travis?
We come home from school one day, like April or May. It just started getting warm. I think I was in 2nd grade, and it was sitting in the living room floor. Like, I don't know if it had a box either, but it was already plugged up for us, and it just had the Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, on the same cartridge. It's split. You know what I'm saying? You pick which one you're going to play whenever you log on to it. So,
yeah,
we walked in from school, getting off the bus, and it was in the floor. I don't know what the hell we did to get it, but we got it, and then we played it, and we thought those were the only 2 games that ever existed for it until we went to my neighbor's house about 6 months later, and he had Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and Zelda and Contra and a bunch of them.
Man, wasn't those games great? Hey, fun fact, on the Mario and Duck Hunt cartridge, did you know the second controller actually controlled the duck on Duck
Yeah,
Hunt?
man.
I never knew
You
that.
make
I
it,
was like
I didn't know.
today old when I found that out.
yeah, you can make it zigzag up in the air.
Yeah. But you know what? I'll tell you what, I'll kick this conversation off though. If I'm asked to talk about one game that I would say that I absolutely loved, and just like I probably spent the most time playing, it's probably a tie between Mike Tyson's Punch Out, but I would say the main one is Super Mario Brothers 3. Did you guys realize there was so much hype around Super Mario Brothers 3? Like back in those days, Fred Savage was a huge actor, the guy from Wonder Years, and he done a movie called, I think it was The Wizard, and
Yes.
they actually debuted that game in that movie. And dude, it blew people's mind. And when you actually sat down and finally got your hands on Mario 3, and it was so different from the other two Marios because you were getting stuff that could make you fly and swim and all kinds of crap. I mean, it just blew people's minds. And some of my best childhood memories are sitting around with whoever and playing Mario 3. Go
So
ahead, Daniel.
I remember when we first got Mario 3, I can't remember if I was the one. Me and Matt had Mario 3, both of us did. He had a copy and I had a copy. I can't remember who it was that got it first, but we were used to playing Super Mario Brothers and Mario Brothers 2. And so if you'll remember the cartridge, okay, it was a yellow cartridge. It was Super Mario 3 in blue, and it had Raccoon Mario on it. And I made fun of that game. Like before I had played it, I was like, what the crap is this? We're going to sit there and try to play Mario. He's got a raccoon tail and raccoon ears. This is going to be stupid. And we started playing that game, and that is my all-time favorite NES game. When I talk NES, that is my all-time favorite is Mario 3. And for most of the people on all the Facebook groups and stuff that I've seen, that's what their favorite game is too. That was a really, really good game.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's my favorite of all time too. Of course, you've got classics like Castlevania and Mike Tyson's Punch Out and absolutely the Legend of Zelda. But if I can't ever rethink of a time, I got more memories and the music from that game, and it's just so nostalgic to me. I'll tell you, even in my adult life, me and my wife sat and played Mario 3, and it's just as fun today as it was 30 years ago.
Oh yeah, that's a fun game right there. And you mentioned that movie, The Wizard. I watched The Wizard about 4 or 5 years ago again, and at the end of it, whenever they unveiled the Mario 3 game, uh, Fred Savage's little brother was the one that was in that big Nintendo competition and stuff. He was actually finding the whistles. If you go back and look,
Oh,
he was in the castle in World 1 in that little mini castle, and he ended up flying up to the top, and he actually was finding the whistles.
yeah, yeah.
And back
When,
then you didn't know about that stuff, so I thought that was a cool little fun fact there.
yeah, that's what I was going to say because nowadays, of course, they don't really put cheats in games anymore. But like there was one part in the game where you're running and you stop on like one of those white blocks that is a hill, and you squat down, and if you hold it down long enough, you fall behind it. Now, how are you supposed to figure that out, man? I mean, unless somebody does it on accident. Because back
Right.
in those days, you didn't have Google, you didn't have the internet, but somehow we always found that stuff out. And it makes you wonder how did anybody ever find that stuff out?
A lot of that stuff was dumb luck for me, but I never had a Nintendo Power subscription. But Nintendo Power was a magazine that come out sometime between about the mid '80s up through about the mid '90s, probably. But Nintendo Power had a lot of different little cheats and stuff in it.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people found that out. But now some of that stuff was just dumb luck. You sit there and you jump, and all of a sudden you hit a hidden block or something. And you're like, "What's
Yeah.
this?"
Yeah. Travis, what takes you back? What's your favorite game from the NES days?
I like Mike Tyson's Punch Out, Contra, and RC Pro Am. I liked a few different ones, but I was a huge Mike Tyson fan growing up. So he was I wanted to be Mike Tyson. I just, I didn't ever get as big as Mike Tyson, but
Yeah.
I liked that game, and it was hard to figure out. You couldn't just go in there and just hit A and B. You had to figure out a way to beat the different people, so I got beat to death by not Glass Job, who was the second guy.
Von Kaiser.
Yeah.
He was the second guy.
Von Kaiser was the second dude.
It took me a minute to beat him. Once I got past him, then the problem I had was
Piston Honda.
no, not him. It was
Tiger Healy.
The Indian
Yeah.
guy, man.
Oh,
'Cause
great
you
time.
That dude was brutal. Yeah.
You'd have to block 5 times before he got dizzy, and then you could hit him.
Yeah, that dude was brutal, man.
So the one that I never could beat was Bald Bull. I always had a hard time with him.
He done that charge, and if he hit you with that charge, you was basically knocked out.
Yeah, you had to time it just right. You hit him in the stomach, they'd knock him down.
That's what I loved about Mike Tyson's Punch Out. If I wasn't playing Mario 3, Mike Tyson's Punch Out was a number 2, because one of the main things I loved about Nintendo games was the boss battle. And they don't have boss battles hardly in games these days. But Mike Tyson's Punch Out, every fight was a boss battle, because you had to figure out how to beat each guy. Each guy had his own little trick you had to use to beat him. And man, that I loved that game, because it's a solid number 2 on my list, because Mike Tyson's. But like I just played it the other day and still got whipped by Mike Tyson, man. And I get mad at 46 years old. I get mad at it.
Hey, listen, when he got beat by Buster Douglas, because I was a huge Mike Tyson fan.
Oh, I was too.
He got knocked out by Buster Douglas. I had the code to go just to Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
And I just let him beat me up for like 10 times in a row, because I felt so bad for Mike Tyson losing.
Listen, when he got beat by Buster Douglas, not to get off on boxing too much, but I was watching that fight live, because I'd always go to my uncle's house, and he had enough money to get the pay-per-views. And when Mike Tyson got knocked out, because to me, Mike Tyson was larger than life. And when he got knocked out, I was like questioning, is this life even real?
Is it worth living anymore?
I mean, what's going on here, Mike Tyson don't get knocked out.
Or knocked down.
Yeah.
I actually watched that fight too. I remember that fight. Yeah.
I remember the fight where Tyson came out and fought Peter McNeely right after he got out of prison. And
A cocoon of horror, baby.
Yeah, and Dad had went to the kitchen to get a sandwich, and he come back and it was over.
That was
He was like, "Are you kidding me?"
What's sad is that Peter McNeely talked so much trash before that fight, man.
Wrote a little limerick and everything for it.
And he didn't last 30 seconds. But yeah, man.
Rough.
Well, hey, Matt, let's hear what your favorite game is, man. Let's talk a little. Let me pick your brain.
I don't know if I've got a favorite game. I mean, Mario 3, obviously. I mean, that game was just awesome. I mean, there's so many though. Friday the 13th comes to mind.
I forgot about Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th was really classic. Ghosts and Goblins, even though that game was just the hardest game I ever played, it's a classic for me. Mike Tyson's Punch Out was classic. Double Dragon, there's so many really good games. It's hard for me to say which one was actually my favorite, because I
forgot
really
about Double Dragon.
Do I?
I forgot about Double Dragon.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many of them that I really enjoyed playing. So I don't really know if I had a favorite. But Mario 3, if I had to be pinned down, I mean, Mario 3 would probably be that one that was my all-time favorite. But God, it was Castlevania. Just everything back then.
That's what I was going to say.
If you beat a Nintendo game back then, because most of them didn't have a lot of really good save points. If you got beat, you had to go all the way back. So, you beat a Nintendo game back then, you done something.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was an accomplishment.
That's what I was going to say. I think everybody's sitting here agreeing. Mario 3, probably it's the greatest Nintendo game that was ever made. But Matt, I know you got a lot to talk about this. Let's talk some Castlevania, baby. Come on with it.
Man, I'm going to tell you, Castlevania is probably like the best series aside from Mario. As far as for me, I mean, that game is just. I guess it speaks to like the Halloween type person in me, because you're dealing with monsters. You're dealing with like almost classic Universal monsters, because you got the Mummy, you got the Grim Reaper type stuff. And it's just a great series. But I remember buying Castlevania 3 when it came out, and that game, that game was awesome when it came. I think me and Daniel played it because I bought it at Kmart when it released, and we played it like that night. And I mean, we stayed up till like 6 or 7 that morning playing it because it was just so good. Wasn't a big fan of Castlevania 2 though. I don't know how you could beat that game as a kid, because it was just, I didn't know half of how to do it.
What was hard about it? I don't think I don't remember it.
I would do okay up until you got to this little mountain and you couldn't do anything. You couldn't jump over it or anything. And that's where I always got stuck, because I would rent that game every weekend at the video store here in town. I could always beat it or beat most of that stuff, but until I got to that part of the open world, couldn't get anything done with it. So I just quit. Never went back to it.
Daniel, what's your take on it, buddy?
Dude,
I don't remember that
Chomp on Castlevania.
So let's go.
first thing that was talked about was Castlevania 3. Castlevania 3 come out in 1990, and me and Matt probably put more hours on Castlevania 3 in his bedroom than what we did on anything else, any other single game. I remember I would get home from school, I would drop my books off at my house, and he lived right down the street from me, and I would go up to his house and we would start playing Castlevania 3. And Castlevania 3 to me is the best NES Castlevania that's on there. You talk to other people, they might say Castlevania 1 ranks or even Simon's Quest, but then you got off on talking about Simon's Quest, Castlevania 2. The thing that made that game so hard for me was it didn't make any sense. All of the NPCs, the non-playable characters, of all of the little people that you talk to and stuff, they didn't tell you anything. And if they would have told you, hey, go to the mountain with a red crystal and kneel, you know, if they would have told you that would have helped you progress in the game. So I remember exactly what Matt's talking about. It was a 2D side scroller that was really the first open world game besides The Legend of Zelda that I'd ever played.
You know what struck me down, but I don't remember playing Castlevania 2. I'm gonna have to go rip my eyes out, man.
So rip your eyes out because you failed to see the truth. But
yeah, I ain't seeing the truth here.
You did not see the truth. But okay, here's what happened with Castlevania 2. It was an open world game. Okay, but Nintendo was an 8-bit system that had a bunch of 2D side scrollers that couldn't do open worlds yet. The technology wasn't there. Okay, so what ended up happening is you would play all the way through to, right or left. It would let you go right or left the whole way. There wasn't no up or down like Zelda. It was right or left. Okay, and you could get to a mountain, and then you were stuck if you didn't have a particular crystal, and you had to do something with that particular crystal. If you went all the way to the other end, okay, you run into a lake, and it's just water. So if you jump in that, you're dead. Wow. And you had to know what to do when you were in certain areas of the game in order to make the game open up more. And there was nothing NPC-wise to help you. There was nothing in the in the book when you rented it, you got the book, or you bought it and you got the book, you just read through the book. There wasn't anything to help you. And so that's what made the game so hard is it dropped you in the middle of this world of crap, and you just didn't know how to level up. You didn't know how to level up. You didn't know what to do. There was like 2 mansions that you could get to. The purpose of the game was go to 5 different mansions and get Dracula's body and reassemble it and then kill him again. That was the whole game. But you could get to 2 mansions and you could get those 2 things. But after that, if you didn't know what to do with certain things, that's what made it so hard, is that you didn't know what was going on.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm fairly confident I've ever played it, but I'll tell you, as soon as we get done here tonight, I'm going to go play it tonight. Because I got to know what that's all about, man. Travis, did you ever play Castlevania?
I don't think I played any of them. Any of the
What?
Castlevanias. Yeah, I did. Listen, I wasn't good at games like even Super Mario Brothers. Like I'd get to level 4, level 5, and by then my anxiety was through the roof anyway. I was over it. Now my brother Johnny, he knew how to get 100 lives like the first week we had that. And like you said, we didn't have the internet. So it's something he figured out. He could jump on top of the flagpole at the end of it. He could do the backstroke in the water worlds. Like he knew all the little tricks. But when he got to the 8th world, you had all those little spaces you had to run over. Well, he thought you had to jump over all those. So I watched him, and we was at my cousins, Andy and Alan's. And Andy was watching him. He's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm jumping over these holes. I'll die." He said, No. He said, "Let me see it." And he ran across there, man. We was like, "What the hell?" We've been playing this suicidal almost, trying to get over these little holes, and they just run across it in 30 seconds. So I like the games like as far as Mike Tyson's Punch Out, it's straightforward. You got to outpunch the guy. You beat him. RC Pro Am, I got to be first. Contra, you kill everything that moves, except yourself. As far as the little stuff going left and right, I couldn't. My anxiety wouldn't allow me to play games like that. But now another boxing game was Ring King, and it wasn't like Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Mike Tyson's Punch Out, you could see the back of your guy's head, and he could throw some punches up. But Ring King, you could actually move around the ring. It didn't have the star power because it didn't have a real life boxer's name on it. But I thought it was a pretty good game too.
I remember playing Ring King at your house, Travis. You had Ring King, and you also had some kind of Olympics game. And I remember that was
World Track and Field.
No, it was World Games is what it's called. It had bull riding and diving and
you could. I remember the bull riding. I remember the diving, and I remember
sumo wrestling.
You had to arm wrestle somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You had to arm wrestling on it.
Well, you know what? Speaking of hard games, and this is my opinion, but we're talking about having anxiety attacks and all this good stuff. If any of you guys ever played the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that was the hardest game that Nintendo ever put out. And when you finally got to that water stage where you had to swim around all that seaweed, man, or not, it would shock you to death, man. It's you had to get up and walk out of the room, or you're going to throw it through the freaking wall, man. That game was so hard.
That was the last time I ever played that game. I tried that water thing all day, trying to get through all the bombs. I was like, "No, it's over. I'll never play this game again."
So did you know that was only level 2?
Yeah,
the dam was only level 2. That was only
didn't you have to defuse bombs and stuff like that while you was trying to get through? God.
It was like 5 or 6 different bombs that you had to go and defuse. So I remember me and Matt played this particular level like all the time because Matt had the game. I didn't have it. I would go over to Matt's and play it. But in some of the videos in years since, and some of the videos on YouTube that I've watched, they said that Michelangelo was the turtle that you needed in the dam because he was supposed to handle a little bit better in the water. Now, I mean, I wouldn't know because I killed all 4 turtles whenever I was trying to do that. But Michelangelo is the one that you're supposed to use in the water.
Listen, I built bombs in the Navy in real life, and sometimes you'd have to defuse them. Doing it in real life was not as hard as Nintendo made that game, defusing bombs on a video game. My anxiety
they
was
broke the
nowhere
mold.
near. My anxiety was a lot better in real life, where you might turn to a pink mist, than it was with Michelangelo underwater trying to defuse bombs.
I remember.
Go ahead, Daniel.
I remember when I finally was able to, and I wasn't even the one that beat it. I saw it beat in my room, and it was Mitchell, of all people.
Oh, God.
We were all up in my room, and I had Game Genie, and I had I had the infinite, not infinite lives. Screw that. It was infinite energy, and so we're going through there. We couldn't die, and so it still took 2 or 3 hours because we still couldn't figure out how to beat some of that. But Mitchell was the one that ended up beating Shredder at the end of it.
See, I don't even remember anything past the water stage because I think I would just black out from a stroke.
That's how freaking hard that game was.
After playing that, man, golly bum.
They had to hide all the knives for me after playing that game, man, because I was suicidal. That's mad.
Yeah, I'm kind of starting to twitch now thinking about it. That game was so hard.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, while we're on the subject of Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade.
Yeah, that was a good
NES
game.
And it was 2-player co-op.
Yeah.
And me and Matt could start off. There wasn't any cheats to that. There wasn't no cheat code or nothing like that. Me and Matt played that game enough to where we got good enough to where we could go all the way through it and beat it.
That was a fun game.
It was. Fun game. I have it on the Switch now.
Listen, I threw all my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys away after the water stage. I didn't play the second game. I didn't even walk through the toy aisle anymore because I was sick of the turtles.
Matt had them all. Matt had all. I had Bebop and Rocksteady, and Matt had all 4 turtles. Matt had all 4 turtles, and he had Splinter. I think you had a couple of others too. You had the Rat King, and you had one of the Foot Clan.
Yeah, I had Baxter Stockman and Foot Clan, and yeah, I think that was it as far as like villains. I mean,
did you have Krang?
I never got Krang. You know what was funny is when growing up where we grew up, you didn't see a lot of really cool toys. So I never saw like Megatron growing up.
But I'll tell you who had him. Hey, I'll tell you who had Megatron. The only Megatron I've ever seen in real life is Mitchell had him.
Really?
Back in the day. He had Megatron, and he had who was the purple guy that turned into a gun that stayed on Cybertron besides Megatron? It was like his number 2 guy.
Yeah, well, you had Megatron turned into Galvatron.
Yeah, he had Galvatron too.
Starscream was the number 2 guy, but I don't know that he turned into a jet.
I know what purple gun you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
Yeah,
he's that one too.
Her face and one little eye in the middle. I can't remember.
My mom worked at Walmart, and she was the toy manager. She was the manager of the toy department. So if there was any toys that I wanted, she put them back, like she'd hide it behind some other toys, and then buy it at the end of the day.
Hey, I got a quick story about a toy that'll make you just throw up. When I was about probably in my 20s, early 20s, you remember there was a drugstore there in Etowah that was kind of on the left side of the road that it went out of business. It was right next to Rocky Top going out of town.
It was right
beside
the
Anderson's.
It was an old mom and pop store, right?
That was Anderson's. That was right beside the depot.
So for some reason, I'm in there one day, right? And I'm just bebopping around. And this is, keep in mind, I'm in my 20s, man. I think even Jace was born, my youngest son. Or oldest son, I'm sorry. So I was in there and I'm looking around, and back there on the shelf, they got a brand new, still in the box, never been touched Starscream back there.
What?
I'm talking an OG, not from the
Was it-
1985 Starscream.
That's
Huh?
freaking sweet.
Oh, it was the first Gen Starscream.
Yes, I'm talking. This sucker had been in there since 1984, whenever, and nobody had just bought it. It's back there on the shelf, just sitting there.
Tell
you
me
I mean,
you
it was
bought
like-
that.
It was not. That's my point. It was like $15, and I was like, "Nah, man, I ain't wasting my money on that." You know how stupid that was?
Oh my
Mm.
God, you didn't buy that?
No, sir. I walked right
Dang.
out and left it laying there.
You go to eBay right now, and there's people selling that thing for like hundreds of dollars, especially if it's in the same box.
I don't even want to know.
first gen stuff is hard to find.
Well, see, we're talking about, Transformers. Transformers, I remember back at Inglewood School, most of the boys, you were either collected Transformers or you collected G.I. Joe. I didn't know a whole lot of people that had both. I was a G.I. Joe collector. I didn't have a whole lot of Transformers. I had all my stuff was Masters of the Universe and G.I. Joe.
Yeah, man, you can't go
I
wrong
had-
with Masters of the Universe.
I had GoBots, son. We couldn't
Heck
afford
yeah, I had
Transformers.
But I don't ever remember, I don't ever remember playing a Nintendo game with Transformers.
I don't either. I don't
Because
either.
remember, you would think that they would have made one as big as Transformers was and as big as Nintendo was at the time. You figured that there would have been a game, but I don't ever remember coming across a G.I. Joe game, a He-Man game.
Surely there was a G.I. Joe game.
They did have a G.I. Joe game, but it wasn't worth anything. You could only pick like one of 5 G.I. Joes to play with.
Flint and Duke. Or
It was
somebody.
Flint, Duke, Snake Eyes, and
Lady J.
yeah, some other people when you did missions. It was almost like, you remember the X-Men game,
Yeah.
and you played Gambit, and Gambit had his own level, and you played Wolverine, and Wolverine had his own level.
Yeah, I remember that.
G.I. Joe was about like that. Like, they had their own levels and stuff.
Yeah, I
from
don't
what I
like that. That was, but it's funny that they didn't really push like that. But then you had like Friday 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street had their own games.
Me and
But
you
I
bought
think-
Nightmare on Elm Street at a yard sale. That was awesome.
I do remember that. That game
what-
sucks too because it's like there's no point in that game.
So it looks like the Transformers had a game come out in 1985 on the Commodore 64.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's a computer game, right?
Yeah, so that was a little bit of the research, not to get off topic completely, but a little bit of the research that I did today was, back in the 70s, if you wanted to play a video game, you went to an arcade.
Yeah.
They didn't have a whole lot of consoles. Consoles started coming out around 1977, but you had a bunch of third-party makers of the consoles and the games, and they didn't put quality into it. And so what you ended up with is you go spend a big old bunch of money for a console or a game, and it sucked. You couldn't even play it half the time. And they had so much of this, the market was saturated with it. And from about 77 till about 1983, it almost killed the video game industry. And in 83, you had Famicom that came out in Japan. And Famicom later become the NES.
Yeah.
And it was released in 1985, I think, in America. And that was the Famicom system. But all those systems before that, I mean, even Atari was one of the better ones. But and I'm thinking in television and different things like that, the market was saturated with that stuff, and all them games sucked, and it almost killed the whole video game industry.
Yeah, that's what happened when on the Atari, when they made the game E.T., which is recognized as the worst video game ever created. They just said, "Hey man, we need you to make this game. It's got to come out before the movie comes out." So they just threw something together. It sucked horribly, and they ended up taking a big loss on it and buried them all in a landfill out in Texas or Las Vegas or something like that.
I
And
didn't know
that. Well, now that was always like a rumor, like you ever heard that they buried like 10 million ET, cartridges in this landfill? Well, there's a documentary on Netflix, and I forget what it's called. This
I've
guy,
seen it. Yes.
he actually goes and to the landfill, and they look up pictures and find out where actually where they buried them at, and sure enough, they found them. They buried all those suckers in a landfill, man.
Well, they needed
was-
to, because those games that they were making back then sucked. They did that with E.T. and they did that with a bunch of other movies, and it was making money just because it was the movie. Go ahead, Trav.
Getting back to this Transformer thing for a second. Now that wasn't that made in America, that show cartoon?
I'm sure that it was
Because I'm thinking that GoBots was Asian.
GoBots
No.
came first, I believe.
No, I'll tell you what,
GoBots was actually first. Yeah.
Well,
The
right,
first,
but the Transformers put them out of business. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why. See, when the Nintendo come out, Transformers was kind of going down. I mean, for a while, because I mean, there wasn't no cartoons on no more, nothing like that. You couldn't hardly find the toys. But if Nintendo would have made a big game of it, it would have brought them back up. So maybe it had something political to do with them putting GoBots out. You know what I mean?
Maybe. I remember not so much Transformers, but the GoBots figures when I lived in Oklahoma in 1984, 1985. My friend that lived next door had older brothers that was about 13, 14 years old, and they had a bunch of GoBots figures. They didn't have Transformers, and this is early to mid 80s.
Yeah, that's when
I just
had all my
remember GoBots. You could go to the dollar store and get them, and you couldn't Transformers. So I could always afford some GoBots, but I could
That's
hardly
why-
ever afford a Transformer.
That's why I had GoBots.
Matt, what
remember,
was you gonna say?
I remember one Christmas I had gotten it. I think it was when I was in kindergarten. I had gotten I got Optimus Prime, and I took him to school that January when we came back, and I lost his hand.
Oh man,
Lost his hand because me and Tommy Roberts were playing because he had gotten Thundercracker, and I had gotten Optimus Prime, so we was having a Decepticon Autobot battle, and I'd lost Prime's fist that you had to push into where the headlights were on the truck when you turned him into the robot, and we never could find it, so I always had
Tommy probably ate it.
Probably did, because I don't know where that thing went.
That was the thing about Transformers too, and maybe it was just because I was a stupid kid. I could never figure out how to put them together right.
Some of them were hard.
You try to make them transform, and I could get everything except for like one arm wheel that, you know, it's the arm, but it's supposed to be the wheel, and I never could tuck it in right or whatever.
Yeah, end up breaking it.
Yeah, some of them were like really sharp edges too. So you try to like mess with them, you get like cut.
Well, the Transformers, if I remember, weren't they metal? Were they
I think
metal?
some of them were.
They were back in the 80s. Yeah, they were metal.
Yeah,
You
so
had to be
see,
tough.
I mean, yeah,
Had to be
like
tough to be a kid in the 80s.
we're Gen X, man. We don't mess around. You know, we had metal toys. You know, you get mad at your friend, you just transform it into a truck and you chuck it at them. You know.
Yeah, then Denny's knocked out and you're picking up teeth off the ground.
Yeah, that's how we
Tonka.
rolled.
And Tonka trucks, you could beat somebody to death with one of those because it was real. It's made out of the same metal as your car was.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that people have been run over by real Tonka trucks.
All right, well, check this out. Getting back to the video game thing. How many of you guys ever played Friday the 13th? That's
Friday the
another
13th
game I
was-
spent a lot of time on.
Friday the 13th was a very good game in my opinion, but a lot of people online that I've seen said that they don't really care for it. And
Well, those guys suck. That, you know.
well, I kind of understand where they're coming from because the game was very hard, and it was another one of those games to where you didn't really have a good direction of what you were supposed to do.
It was kind of open world too, wasn't it?
Yeah, you had the run of the camp, and you could either play as one of three girls or one of three guys, and you could change them out intermittently throughout the game. It was almost like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you know, the first one where you could bounce back and forth. So you could play with this one character, and you run into a house or whatever, and there's another character sitting there, and then you can trade weapons, you can change supplies, you can change health and stuff. But the problem is the game didn't ever really tell you how to beat Jason. and God forbid you're running around because you got zombies coming up on the path. And you start off with rocks, so you're throwing rocks at zombies until you get a machete. I think it's the next thing that you can get, an axes and a pitchfork finally. But you're throwing rocks at these things, and then freaking Jason shows up out of the middle of nowhere, and he kills you right there. Boom, you're just dead, right?
Yeah.
And you don't even know what to do. I can watch people playing that on YouTube, and they're sitting there going, well, I don't know what to do. And I didn't either. And so you meet him up on the road, he kills you, he runs off, you pick another person.
You end up fighting his mama's head.
Yeah,
in one of the cabins.
We had Game Genie, and Matt had the game. I think he actually traded one of his games to you for Friday the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Matt, you have to back me up on this. I don't know, but
I don't even remember, because I remember when me and Corky met. The reason me and Corky met was I had traded him some game, and he had traded me Legend of Zelda, the gold cartridge. That's how we met.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that.
I don't remember what game it was that I traded him to get Zelda, but it was something that he wanted, and that's how we became friends.
It was probably Skate or Die or something like that.
Probably.
Matt had Skate or Die.
And I had Skate or Die as well, so that's probably how I got it.
Skate or Die was one of those fun games where it was just, I don't know, I love Skate or Die.
Hey, another fun game like that one was TNC Surf Designs. You guys remember playing that?
I don't remember that one. I remember California Games.
That one was good too.
Because you could surf on that one.
Couldn't you roller skate up the road and you had to jump over cracks and random banana peels?
Yes, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I remember Friday the 13th playing that game, and I watched a guy on Facebook the other night. He streamed it where he beat Friday the 13th like in 15 minutes, and I'm like,
really?
Yes, it makes you sick.
That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't see how. Like, that's what I'm saying. There's got to be a way that you could beat that game real fast like that.
He was probably cheating. He probably had a darn ROM going in the background or something like that.
You got to watch them people.
It's just crazy. I sat and watched him, and I was just like, wow. Because he I guess there's a pattern on where Jason's going to be, and he's figured it out.
Probably, yeah.
I was like, man, this guy knocked in. He beat him. I think it was 3 times is how you got to beat him.
I wanted to stay away from Jason because he would run me down on the road and kill me.
Yeah, he would do like a run by and stab you and keep running, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Well, I think what's fun is when you ran into him in the lake, you're in that rowboat, and all of a sudden he just came swimming.
Yeah, he just goes right through the rowboat. Like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Travis.
The dumbest game I ever played, and it was the dumbest game, was Jaws.
I never played Jaws.
Jaws was actually a fun game. It was stupid, but it was fun.
It was not fun. I do not remember having fun in that game.
What was you going to say, Travis?
The stupidest game that I ever played was Paperboy. Who's going to get a job? Who's going to play a game about a job? I don't want a job. I'm 10.
It's like burger time.
Yeah. I'm trying to get this guy his newspaper. He's trying to hit me with a lawnmower. You kidding me, man?
Yeah, this dog's chasing you.
I'm on a bicycle. I can understand a dog chasing. That happens. But I ain't never had a neighbor throw a lawnmower out in front of me and I was riding my bicycle down the street. Doing too much, bruh.
I will say Nintendo had no shortage of stupid games.
Yeah. Did you guys ever play let's see, did you guys ever play Nightmare on Elm Street?
Oh,
You're like walking down the street and then all of a sudden you fall asleep. Then you go into a dream world and there's freaking skeleton bats coming at you. Yeah. I mean, where did that come from?
So how are you going to walk down the street in motion? You're awake and all of a sudden now you're asleep.
Hey, I mean, listen, this actually, that happened to me in boot camp one time. Listen, We were sleep deprived for about 3 days when we first got there. Well, you never caught up because you went to bed at 10, you got up at 6, if hair lived hell. All right. Well, we had to stay up. We got to go to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening. At 7 o'clock in the evening, we got woke up to run about 20 miles and do all these tests in between this running. Well, the next morning, we got to have breakfast, whatever we wanted. After the little graduation thing, we passed our final test. All right. Well, me and my buddy are the road guards. We're the guys in the back of the formation. And when you come up to a road, you've got to run in front of everybody and stop the traffic so they can cross the street. And so we're up there and we're holding traffic. We both fell asleep standing up with our arm out. We woke up, man, and the division was way up there. I mean, there's like a half mile up the street. So, I mean, Freddy Krueger wasn't around that I know of, but you can definitely be walking and fall asleep. I mean,
that was definitely a nightmare on your street, wasn't it?
That happened
It
a
was
lot
almost
in that game.
It was almost a nightmare. I mean, it would have been terrible if we'd got caught asleep back there standing up. I mean, if they'd have made it to the next street before we ran up ahead of them, they'd have knew, these guys they've went UA. They went AWOL on us. Supposed to be holding traffic and they've left.
Well, hey, check this out. I'm gonna say 3 words, and I know this is gonna resonate with Matt and Daniel here. So, and this one's coming from back in the day, so you two be ready for it. All right, here I come with it. Super Spike V-Ball.
Yeah.
Praise God, baby. Hey, I'll let you tell something. That is the first game I ever played front to back and beat.
I will say this.
That game's legendary. That is probably one of the best co-op games I've ever played.
I will say this, and Matt just hit the nail on the head. I like anything on Nintendo or any other system that is 2-player co-op, especially when you're a kid. Some of my favorite memories are playing 2-player co-op with Matt. That's one of the biggest drawbacks from Double Dragon, because the arcade game of Double Dragon, you could play 2-player co-op, but you couldn't on the Double Dragon NES. And I think that with games like Contra, you had games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, you had Super Spike V-Ball, any of that stuff that you could play 2-player co-op was great. I remember me and Matt, we could do the United States circuit. Okay. So you start off, you're playing like Daytona Beach or whatever, and then you go and you're playing somebody else from another part of the country. So like up to level 4 or something, we had to play these 2 guys from Reno. Okay. The dudes from Reno kicked their butts like every time that we played them. I think we only beat them like once or something. And then we finally made it to the dudes from New York, and then they creamed us too. But you could play the world circuit. And I remember you always had to start off playing China, and we never could beat China. And we finally beat them one time when we went to Australia, and then we couldn't do anything with it from there. So, I mean, you saying that you beat Super Spike V-Ball, Corky, that's saying
Yes, sir.
something. That's saying
Yes,
something
sir.
right there, because that was a hard game.
If I'm not mistaken, you end up in Russia, and that's the last ones you played.
Even Nintendo knew we was in a Cold War in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorites. That's one of those games that I really enjoyed playing. God, there was just so many good matches there. I don't know. That was just one of my favorite co-op games ever.
And it actually played well too. You could set the spike, charge it up, jump up there and spike it real hard. That game, for a Nintendo Entertainment System game, that sucker played well, man. It was actually a very good game.
That was the thing about controls back there. If you had a game that had good controls, it didn't matter if it was something like you're playing volleyball or if you're playing like some kind of, big game or whatever, open world. If the game had good controls, that made or broke the game.
Yeah.
So I don't know about y'all, but like when I played a game and it was real hard, and like you could see yourself getting better. Like I played Bill Elliott's Racing. All right. At first, if you got last place, you was lucky. if you finish the race in last.
Yeah.
But eventually you get pretty good. You finish top 10, then you come in second, But once I was able to lap Bill Elliott, the dude that's on the game, and you could beat it, it felt like it was way too easy after that. And I'd lose interest.
Well, that's kind of what happened with Days of Thunder. And Matt,
Yeah,
you can
Days of
attest
Thunder.
you can attest to this. It's the exact same way. 9 times out of 10, when you played it, you didn't even finish the race because
No.
you ran out of gas because you didn't remember to fill your gas tank up, or your tires blew out, or your engine blew up, or whatever. Half the time when you tried to pit, you went in too fast and it wouldn't even stop. Now, me and Matt made fun of that a whole lot too.
I tell you, the hardest game aside from Ninja Turtles, the hardest game, but it was also the funnest game for me, was Ghost and Goblins. There is not a game that is, I don't think, as hard as that game. Super Ghost and Goblins on Super Nintendo was just as hard. And this one that they came out with a few years ago that I got on PlayStation 4, it's harder. And I think they just love doing it. See
So
how hard
Ghost-
they can make those games. But those are fun games. But Ghosts and Goblins, I never beat it. I loved playing it, but I was never any good. And it's like what Travis was talking about. When you keep playing a game that's hard and you keep getting better and better and better. I never got better at Ghosts and Goblins. I didn't.
Ghost and Goblins give you the ultimate middle finger. Okay.
Yeah.
And I say that because you start off from level 1 is just hard as crap. And I could make it into that little town or whatever with the buildings and all that right before you had to go into the cave, if you remember the game. That was somewhere around level 2 or 3 or whatever. But later on, when you're able to watch all of these games, people play through these games on YouTube and whatnot. So you play all the way through Ghost and Goblins, and you finally beat it. And then what happens? It's not even the real game. Then it makes you replay it again on something even harder to beat it officially. So whenever you beat the game the first time, you don't even beat it officially. It don't even give you credit.
Really? Dang.
No, it's the ultimate middle finger.
Oh, yeah, I love it. I love that game, and I love the whole, Halloween vibe it gives you, like Castlevania, but it's too hard. And when they did the newer one from a few years ago, and the makers were like, we intentionally made this game hard to keep in line with the last two. And I'm like, man, when a game gets too hard, I don't want to play it no more.
Yeah,
Wizards
some
and
of them do
Warriors
get
was
too
like
hard.
that. Wizards and Warriors was like that. That last guy that you had to beat on it, you had to memorize where he was going to reappear again. Like you'd hit the guy and he'd disappear, and then you was in this cave and he'd reappear somewhere else. If you wasn't over there to hit him, he'd disappear from there before you got there. So you had to memorize where he was going to be. But that game probably took 2 years to finally beat it.
And
Yeah,
you beat it without any kind of cheat code or anything. I remember watching you play that game.
Yeah, I didn't know what a genie was until about 1991, and that's because I saw it in one of them magazines. Man, I'd like to have that. We never could find one.
Corky, did you ever play Ninja Gaiden?
Oh man, yeah, Ninja Gaiden, especially part 1, dude. I played so religiously. I remember when I lived over in Inglewood in a trailer right there by the railroad tracks. I had a black and white TV, and I remember I would play Skate or Die and Ninja Gaiden constantly, because it seems like there for a while we'd all go home and everybody would play Ninja Gaiden. Then you'd come back the next day and we'd talk about how, did you get this far? Did you get that far? But man, Ninja Gaiden was another great one, and I'd actually forgot about that, man. So I'm glad you brought Ninja Gaiden up.
Yeah, you talking about first gen Starscream, man? You was playing that game on a first gen TV, black and white.
Yeah, man, how you gonna have how you gonna be so poor that you have a black and white TV in 1991, man? Come on.
I did. That's how
It'd be
I
like
played
that.
Mario 3.
Matt had a 12-inch black and white TV, and we played Mario 3, and we got to World 2 in the desert, and it was that level where you got to the pyramid. Okay, so you start off outside the pyramid and you jump up a couple of things, and then it looks weird, like it's built into the pyramid, but if you had a color TV, you could see the damn door. Okay, we had a black and white TV. We couldn't see the door, and the time ran out on us. Ran out. We couldn't find a door.
So Matt trades me this game, and this is when I realized I had a problem. I forget what the game was, Matt. You'd go around and you had to find these keys, and you use these keys to get through the game.
That's Castle Quest. That was
Castle Quest. All right, but so you had to find the keys. But I didn't know what color of key I had because my TV was black and white.
I'm going to tell you, that game came to me. My dad, it was one of those pawn shop games, and Dad had gotten that, and he got 10 of them. He also got, what was that game that, where it was the skiing game?
Slalom? That was, you traded somebody for slalom.
Dude, I don't remember.
Slalom?
No,
yeah, slalom.
That was not the name of it, but it was a skiing game where you do all these tricks and stuff, sort of like Excite Bike, but it was with snow. But he got me that one, which I really loved it because I thought it was really cool. He got me Excite Bike and Skater Die and Key Quest, and I was like, man, this Key Quest sucks. So Corky was like, hey man, what's that game like? I said, oh man, it's a great game. You love it.
Yeah, let me trade it to Corky. He's got a black and white TV.
You had Castle Quest and you had 10-Yard Fight.
10-Yard Fight was awesome.
And I didn't like either one of them guys. Actually, you said, hey man, let's come to my house and play Castle Quest. I'm like, oh, you got Castlevania? And I show up and it's Castle Quest.
I'll tell you, two of the best sport games I ever played was RBI Baseball, because I thought that was just a great game, and John Elway's Quarterback. I thought those two were just, I for whatever reason, I thought those two were the most magnificent NES sport games ever made.
I didn't have John Elway, but I did have RBI Baseball, and that game came to me via my grandmother, who cheaped out. Okay, because RBI Baseball was made by Tiger, which was a non-Nintendo official third party person. Tiger made RBI Baseball, and it's probably the best game that they ever come out with, and it's one of the best games on Nintendo. But RBI Baseball cost, $19, and Bases Loaded cost $49. Okay, right. So what did I get for Christmas? At $19 RBI Baseball, and that ended up being one of the funnest games that we ever had.
There used to be a baseball game though where you were like robots. You had tanks for legs and stuff like that.
It was
Base Wars.
Yeah, that's it.
But it was fun, man. I remember playing it a lot.
And the pitcher, he had a cannon for an arm.
Yeah,
that's how he gives it to you.
You could charge that sucker up. He'd be like, boosh.
Do you remember that game, Gorky? We had ran the game one night at Bill's, and you spent the night over at my house, and I think it might have been on Super Nintendo. I'm not sure. Maybe it was on NES. But it was a softball game, but instead of using bats, you use pitchforks and shovels.
Yeah, I forget what that's called. Backyard ball or something.
It wasn't even real people. It was like rabbits and squirrels and stuff. I remember that.
Yeah. It was fun, though. I mean, you had a big pickaxe.
You hit the ball, and the third baseman fields it, right? So then they throw it over the first base, and it hits the first baseman in the face, and he drops it. I remember that happening.
Oh man!
No, I tell you what. There's some games that you will always, there's some games you're always going to remember no matter what. It's like music and movies. You remember when you first got it and you first played it, and who you was with, But how many games did you guys beat? Because we beat a lot of games, but there's some that I just couldn't beat.
I'm gonna say for myself on the Nintendo. Just the NES, not counting anything else. Without cheating, without using the Game Genie, I probably only beat 5.
Yeah, I didn't beat many, man. Nintendo games are just too hard. They weren't meant to be beat, man.
No.
Those games are hard.
I don't know how these people beat them in 15 minutes now.
And see what happens is, and you were talking about earlier on in the podcast, Corky, you were talking about the bosses, your boss
Yeah.
fights. So in Nintendo, you go along and you play level 1 and you beat level 1 boss and you go to level 2 and it's quite a bit harder and you beat level 2 boss eventually. Well, then you get to level 3 boss, okay, and it's so hard to get through the level that by the time you get to the boss, you can only play the boss once or twice before you're out of lives, and then you have to start the whole game over.
And that,
So I think what happened with that a lot of times is, you get up into the upper levels and you've already died so many times that you can only play that level or that boss once or twice before you're out of continues or out of lives or whatever. That's the reason why I never beat the Sandman on Mike Tyson's Punch Out, because Mike Tyson's Punch Out, you had a code to Mike Tyson, you had a code to Super Macho Man. Super Macho Man was champion in the game, and Mike Tyson was a good dream fight. Well, the number 1 ranked was Sandman, and you could only, by the time I got to him, I didn't know his pattern, okay, so he'd beat me. So instead of rematching me, I would get sent all the way back to Don Flamingo. And so then you have to fight Don Flamingo again. Then you have to fight Bald Bull again before you can even fight Sandman. So out of all the characters on Mike Tyson's Punch Out, the only one that I've never beat is the Sandman, because I've only played him probably 5 times in my whole life.
I can't even remember what he does.
I could
he
beat
had
the
that-
game. I could
he had
beat the
that
game
uppercut.
Kung Fu with 1 life when I was a kid. I tried to play that last year. I can't even get past the first level. There's just 5 levels.
That was an awesome game. I remember it.
I remember our cousin Christopher had that game, Travis, and he was the first person I watched go through that whole game, and he could do it with 1 life. He never would die.
I put a lot of hours into being able to get through it with 1 life, but and I'll never get it back. But now it just takes 10 minutes for me to realize I was a lot smarter when I was a kid, because I can't figure out how to get past the first guy.
It's all pattern recognition, just like what you were talking about with the boss on Wizards and Warriors. They had the same pattern. Those pattern games back in NES and stuff, they didn't have AI on them.
Yeah, whatever I had back then, I lost it in about 1989, because I'm not the same guy I was in 1987 for sure.
I'm not the same. When going back and playing those games, those old games, I'm nowhere near as good as I used to be.
No, definitely not.
Golly, no.
Did any of you guys ever play a game called Wizardry?
No, I never
No,
saw
I
that.
never heard of that.
No, I never played Wizard.
Wizardry was like one of the original, like you could actually walk down tunnels and you could turn right and left, and it was kind of like trying to be 3D, but that game is right there on the level with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because you could get down there and basically you was going down in a dungeon, and you'd walk up on, you remember how like on like Final Fantasy, you'd just be walking and all of a sudden you'd have to fight a monster,
Yeah.
Well, in Wizardry, you're walking down through this castle, but really all it is just like long hallways with blocks on both sides of it. But the further you get down in there, if you didn't remember how to get back, then you were done. And I can remember several times me and my cousin Heath would be playing that. And if you got too far down into the castle and you didn't level up enough or have enough potions or whatever, you would get down there and get stuck. And, my guy's still there to this day. There was no coming out of it, because you couldn't get back and you didn't have enough stuff to be where you were at. And then that was the reality of that game. If you made a mistake and tried to go too far too soon, time to start all over, because you just messed up.
I've still got men falling on Mario.
You ever wonder where they fall to, Mo?
You did a game I really liked that I'd only played just a few times. Was Batman. Y'all ever play
Batman
that?
was awesome.
So I remember.
Oh yeah,
you got Batman for Christmas that one year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
dude, Batman was next level. Those graphics were next level on that game.
Yeah,
Dude, I love
the
it.
controls weren't great.
No.
The controls is what killed that game. But Batman was one of the ones that you put the Game Genie on, and you could finally make it a Joker. And there ain't no way, if you didn't have Game Genie, that you're gonna beat Batman, because Joker was hard.
Daniel, you know what I'm realizing is you were the Game Genie king, son.
Yes, they didn't turn a Nintendo on unless that genie was going to work.
Screw playing this game right. I'm going to cheat. Baby.
That's the only way that I beat Contra was the code. I had code to 40 men, okay, and then that was how you got to level 6 and level 7 that you only played once or twice in your whole life, okay. You had your 40 men, you got up through there, and you finally figured out those patterns until finally you figured out the whole game's patterns. And then I got to where I could beat it without a Game Genie or without having to put the code in.
But do you realize how hard the game of Contra was? Like, most times you get hit 3 times, you're dead. Dude, there were no save points, and if you got shot one time, you were dead.
Yes.
And buddy, guess what? You get to start the game all over.
100%
Suck it up, Buttercup.
100% pattern recognition. And that's what I'm saying. If like level 1, I could play level 1 and beat it in, a few tries now, because I hadn't played it in a long time. But, level 1 you play 1,000 times versus level 6 that you only play 3 times. Well, you're not going to remember the patterns on level 6 like you do with level 1. So you have to have something that's going to help you to get to those levels to give you some experience. And once you figure out the pattern, then you're fine. Super Contra come out on NES sometime around 1989 or 1990, and Super Contra didn't have the code to 40 men. So when I was playing Super Contra, I had to play the game straight up.
Time to bust out that Game Genie, wasn't it?
No, it didn't have a code for Super Contra that I know of. I had to play it straight up, but I finally figured that game out. But
I remember when he got Game Genie, and I was like, man, they just opened up so many doors for us.
It did. I mean, because there's games that's just sitting there collecting dust that you don't even want to play no more, because it's like, okay, I can play the first 3 levels on that, and I'm great. I get to level 4 and I get killed every time, and I'm sick of playing level 4. I'm tired of playing level 4.
Game Genie.
Then you get the Game Genie, and boom, you're there.
That happened a lot on the Mario games, man. You just get tired of redoing everything, man.
Yeah.
But you know what?
The first Mario game was Mario 2. I was not a fan of Mario 2.
It didn't make any sense to me. If it wasn't linear, then it don't make no sense.
I didn't like Mario 2.
I never played that much. My wife loves it. She still plays it to this day. But
really?
Yeah, dude. She's a Mario 2 fiend. And like she's probably in there playing it right now. But I don't know.
Mario 2 is one of the great many NES games that I never completed. I never beat it.
I've never even seen the 3rd stage of Mario 2. I'm done by stage 2. Yeah, this sucks. But
I'll tell you another game that I liked that was a lot like Contra, and it was a game that I played over at Alan and Andy's house, but it's Jackal. Jackal is, instead of a little man running around with Contra, you're in a truck, and you're driving your truck. You're blowing stuff up, you're shooting things, but you got to go get your POWs. You got to go pick them up, and then it's got a boss at the end of each level. I always like playing it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever played Jackal. I don't remember that
game.
I remember Jackal. I remember playing it. I always like playing I like playing games where like they were based off movies. Or shows or something like that, because I remember coming across Fester's Quest from Adam's Family, and that game's, I don't know.
That game's hard as crap is what that game is.
Dude, I loved Fester's Quest, man. I thought it was awesome.
Had it. It was one of them games that my mama bought for $19 at Kmart or whatever on sale. Yeah. And I played the crap out of it. I couldn't do anything with it because I didn't know how to play it. But it was a good game.
My memory of that game is like I would go over to my cousin Heath's house, and he was like the greatest gamer to this day, he's probably the greatest gamer I know because I don't know why the dude's just good at video games. But he had Fisher's Quest, and he had a Nintendo that the top was ripped off of it. So all you see is the wires and the board sitting there. And the game Fisher's Quest he had, it was nothing but the little chip set. So to play Fisher's Quest, we're inside the Nintendo and we're having to slide the chip set into the little slot. And then boom, our Fisher's Quest is, man, after you've done been electrocuted 5 times.
I got a question about
awesome.
stuff like that. You remember, Daniel, when Ricky would bust the controllers?
Yeah.
But here's my question, because I don't remember walking up into a store like a Kmart or Walmart and just buying a replacement controller. So where did you get them?
We didn't. Once he busted the controller, what happened was we had 2 controllers for the original Nintendo, right? And we played that thing so much that we blew it up, and the Nintendo didn't play anymore. So we ended up with a second Nintendo that come with 2 more controllers. So now we're up to 4 controllers. So Ricky busted up 1 or 2 of the controllers, and I remember you could shake the controller and you could hear shit rattling around in there, and that was the one that you didn't want because you didn't know when Mario was just going to not jump because he's busted his controller.
I remember sitting in his room. I remember one night, me, Travis, and Daniel were sitting there. I don't remember what game it was, but Ricky's playing. Ricky got beat, and Daniel said, "Don't you do it." And Ricky just looked at him, and I mean, he reared back, and he threw that controller against the wall, and I mean, he broke it.
Well, see, they also made controllers a lot better than what they make controllers now. If you take one of them Switch controllers and you throw a Joy-Con, if you throw a Joy-Con up against the wall, you're going to pick it up in 1,000 pieces. You could drop a cinder block on an original Nintendo controller at least 5 times before you're going to have some controller issues.
Yeah, you might scuff the button.
You had to be tough in the 80s to grow up there.
That's dang right. That's what I'm talking about.
Man,
One time I got mad at a game and I threw the Nintendo and said some explicitive things I shouldn't have said. As Dad was coming in the door and he said, "What'd you say?" I was like, "I said, dang it." I was like, God.
Yeah, because you didn't want to get that. You didn't want to get that Nintendo chucked at your head.
No. Dad was a hands-on parent. He didn't have to have weapons. See, I would have much rather my dad give me the whooping than Mom, because Mom used those little thin leather belts.
Oh, God.
I would have to throw my pants away because it'd leave the stripes in them. And she didn't want to go to jail, so she's like, "Well, throw them pants away. I'll get you some more. I'll get you later."
Did she talk like that too?
Yeah, that was the exact voice she used. "Listen, you little shit, I'll kill you." Shit. So I'd much rather get beat by Dad for cussing than by Mom for anything.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Well, I think. Go ahead, Matt.
No, but I was just going to say, but I think all in all, I remember when I was collecting comic books back in the old days, and I would always, one of the really cool things about comic books is it was all advertisements for kids. Anything you wanted as a kid, they advertised in comic books. So that's who was reading comic books. And all the time, it didn't matter which title you was reading, they always had an advertisement for a Nintendo game that was coming out. And that's the only reason we knew Nintendo games were even coming out, is because we get the advertisements through comic books every month.
I like those bingo wings, Corky. Do that again.
Yeah, I know.
Bingo.
Yeah,
bingo.
I can't remember the game. I remember I used to go to Rocky Top every day, and I would stand there and just read the magazines about video games, because it ain't like I could afford to actually take a magazine home with me. But I remember I would go in there when my mom would be working up at Ed's Grocery, and I wouldn't have no way home till 8:00 that night. So I had to do something till 8:00. So I'd stand in Rocky Top and read magazines for 4 hours.
You go into Rocky You go into Rocky Top and you get Nintendo Power. Was back in the day, that was the only. We didn't have YouTube back then. We didn't have the internet. We couldn't look stuff up. So if you needed game cheats or whatever, you had Nintendo Power. And in those magazines, there was always that little bitty insert on the inside that you could rip out and you could fill out and mail it in for a subscription.
Yeah.
And I remember I asked my dad. I said, "Hey, Dad, can you buy me this magazine? How much is it?" "Well, it's $3.99. "No, that's stupid." I said, "Well, okay." So I pulled out that little insert and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna fill this out. Will you get me this subscription?" He said, "How much is it?" I don't know. It was like $20-$30 back then or whatever. He said, "No, I'm not gonna do it. That's stupid." So I never got anything Nintendo Power related. And I was always extremely jealous of anybody that did have Nintendo Power.
See, Nintendo Power was a ripoff though, because Nintendo Power never wanted to give you like the codes and stuff like that. They might give you like a little code here and there, but they always wanted you to call that 1-800 number to get the real info and charge you 99 cents a minute. But the magazine I always went to was called Game Pro. It was a real big, thick magazine.
So Game Pro
they would
didn't come
hook you
out
up.
till I remember getting Game Pros after I got a PlayStation 1, which was in the late 90s, probably 97 or 98. I think I had one when I was a senior in high school.
I think they came out. I think they came out when the Super Nintendo was up, because that's where I learned how to do all my fatalities on Mortal Kombat.
I know.
About 95, I think. 95,
Yeah.
96.
Well, what was the one when I guess it must have been Nintendo Power, but it was whenever Castlevania 2 come out. And the cover of the magazine was Simon Belmont, and he was holding Dracula's head like he had cut it off or something. I thought that was cool.
That's some beautiful artwork on those games back in the day. That's another thing they don't do good these days, man. The artwork was unsurpassed. Even on Atari games, the artwork was awesome. You know?
Yeah, it's hard to find. It's hard. You look at today's games. Today's games are a lot easier, but I think the storyline and the control is a whole lot better than it was back then. But I don't know. You beat a Nintendo game back then, man. You were an ace. I don't care what you were playing.
But here's the problem I had with the good artwork. Okay, you got your $3 that you saved up for 6 years, and you go to the video store and you're gonna get this Bases Loaded game that you know is fire and that you love. But then you see this other game and you're like, God, man, look at that cover. It looks good. You take it home and it's garbage.
Yeah. It's all three dots on the screen, you know.
I remember
take it home and it's Paperboy 2.0 or something.
I remember there was a game at Bill's that I always saw that just had the coolest cover, and it was Times of Lore. Times of Lore, if you know anything about Times of Lore, okay, it's not a Nintendo game, it's a computer game. You put it into your Nintendo, and now it's do you want to walk forward or right? Oh God, walk right.
Oh my Lord.
Do you want to kill the whatever with the fire or water? I don't know. Use water. Oh, you died. God, come on, man.
Hey,
That was
Daniel,
Times of Lore.
that reminds me, do you remember you spent the night at my house one night? We was all doing something, and I think we were playing this game called Mist. And it kept going, ugh, there's something in my eye.
Or that one guy, who are you?
Yeah, and we never could get past it. Ugh, there's something in my eye.
So the whole thing with that game was in the level 1.
Yeah.
And you start off in the back of this covered wagon, and there's a sandstorm outside. Well, there's supplies in the covered wagon, but there's nothing to put on your head. There's no sunglasses or nothing. And every time that you get out of the covered wagon, it goes, oh, the sand is burning my eyes. You got to go back in the wagon. That game sucked.
We never could get out of the wagon.
It was like DEFCON 5. You remember playing
Oh my
DEFCON 5?
God, yes,
And all
Lord.
you did was get in the little elevator and ride up and down. You couldn't play it. There
I'll
wasn't
tell you a
anything to
game that
do.
I tell you a game I hated with a passion, and I don't know if it's just because I couldn't figure it out or what. It was Metal Gear.
Well,
Yeah, I don't remember that on the NES. I don't remember how it played.
Another game with real cool artwork, but was garbage once you put it into the system.
Yeah,
so
really
in
it
Metal
was.
Gear, it looked like it had Michael Biehn from freaking Terminator on the
Yeah.
front of the cover. And so
Yeah, it did.
you put this game in, okay, and the
It
whole
was like him and Snake Plissken had a love child. That was the guy they had on the cover.
you start playing this game and you're supposed to sneak around, right? So you're sneaking around, you're behind this truck, and you got this guard that's going to walk up through here, and you got to go around the truck. But again, it's Nintendo, okay? You don't have all the cool stuff that you could do whenever PlayStation come out. You only had so much memory. So
Yeah.
you didn't know that you had to go get the gas mask in order to get into that one room to get the key. So you walk into the one room and it's like, oh, you're dead. It's like, what just happened? I don't know. Let me try this again. I'm going to walk into this room and, oh, you're dead. And you don't know that you don't have the gas mask because you haven't seen it yet. I mean, it's just
I
stuff
remember
like that. Stuff like
going
that.
like a trailer, like an empty trailer, and I remember walking in, and there was a sleeping dog, and there was a pack of cigarettes in the corner. So I guess you were going to get the cigarettes, but when you picked the cigarettes up, the dog woke up and ate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good dog right there.
It was a great dog. And that's actually how my fear of dogs started. So
Awesome.
You get the
man.
cigarettes in that, and there's some point in the game to where they've got lasers. And I didn't figure this out until I was playing Metal Gear Solid on PlayStation 1. Okay. But on the NES version, you get these cigarettes and you walk into this room and they've got these lasers and you're supposed to smoke. And when you blow the smoke, you can see where the lasers are. So you know where to avoid.
That's why I
in the
smoke
room.
now.
That's what you were supposed to do with cigarettes. But back then, we sucked so bad at that game we couldn't even get to the lasers. So we're like, oh, cool, we just found a pack of cigarettes. What are you gonna do with it? We just thought it was like advertising for Marlboro or something, you know?
Golly bun.
dude, I tell you, but that's a game I would never play again. There's just no way. I don't know if you could beat. I couldn't beat it. I think I probably played maybe 100 Nintendo games, and I might have beat maybe 4.
Yeah, no doubt. They was hard to beat, man. Ain't no doubt about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. But before we have to wrap it up, everybody, give your top 3. Give me your top 3 NES games.
All right, I got this. I'll start off.
All right, go.
I will go top 3. It ain't even hard to say. I'll start at the bottom. Let's go Legend of Zelda 2, Adventures of Link. Next, I'll go Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and then Mario 3 is my number 1.
That's good.
What you got, Matt?
I don't know, man, because Mario 3 for sure is probably my number 1, but I don't know. I like so many of them. You know, it's just really hard for me to pick a 2 and a 3.
You got nothing?
Yeah, because I like them all. I mean, like Castlevania, I really loved. Ghosts and Goblins, I really loved. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, I really loved. So I mean, Punch-Out could be 2, but I don't know. I didn't really have what you would say an all-time favorite, except for I would put Mario 3 in that slot because it was probably a defining game back then.
I think that's what everybody's favorite is. Trav, you go. What you got?
Probably Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Contra, and then Super Tecmo Bowl. I wasn't even a Raiders fan if you play as the Raiders, you got Bo Jackson. They just give him one play out of the 4 because it would have been cheating to give him any more
Yeah,
than that.
yeah. No, Bo Jackson, having him on that game, it was cheating because you could not catch him to tackle.
No,
And Marcus
No.
Allen was the second guy.
Yeah.
no, you
Well, Daniel,
can't.
what you got?
That was a good one.
Oh,
Yeah.
my number 3 is going to be Castlevania 3. My number 2 is going to be Legend of Zelda. I don't think that we give Legend of Zelda enough love tonight. We didn't get the chance to talk about it a whole lot, but first open world game that I ever played, it was awesome. And then, of course, my number 1 is going to be Mario 3. But my
Right.
honorable mention, and Travis mentioned it at the very first of the show, it was the very first game that I ever rented, and it was RC Pro-Am. RC Pro-Am
Yeah.
was a really good game.
Had an awesome soundtrack for a Nintendo game too.
Yes.
But I'll say this about Legend of Zelda before we cut out of here, and we'll revisit this on a Super NES show, because my love for Legend of Zelda didn't come in until I played A Link to the Past, which was on the SNES. Now that, and like I said, I'll save it for another show, but that's probably my all-time favorite Super Nintendo game.
That's a good game. I've got
Yeah,
it on
yeah.
the Switch right now. That's a good game.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Well, fellas, I think this is a good way to wrap it up, man. I think we covered a lot and talked about a lot of games. I have really enjoyed it. What do you guys think?
I thought it was great.
Good.
I was looking forward to this one. I thought it
Yeah.
was great.
We'll definitely revisit this genre in the near future, man, because I could talk about video games 24/7, baby.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
you talk about Super Nintendo. I tell you, my favorite all-time Super Nintendo game is Super Castlevania, because when that
Right.
game came out, that was just, I mean, the way. Of course, you're talking 16-bit at that time,
Yeah.
and then Castlevania come out, it was just wow. I mean, it was just because you got such
Yeah.
like the old, side-scrolling Castlevania, but when you got Super Castlevania, it was just like wow. Okay.
You know what my wow moment for Castlevania was? And I'll go
Right.
ahead and say it. On the PlayStation, Symphony of the Night.
That was a
That's
good
my
one.
all-time number
Oh,
2 video
man,
game.
that game.
That's my
That
number
game
1
is
ever.
so awesome. I love that. I'll go play it right now and fall in love with it again. Praise God.
Mario Kart, my favorite SNES.
Dude, Mario Kart is awesome.
Yeah, it's still
I love
awesome
Mario
today.
Kart.
I played that game so much one night when it first came out that when I went home and went to sleep, I dreamt that I was playing Mario Kart.
Dude,
That's
you can't beat
awesome.
Mario Kart.
No,
Mario
man.
Kart was awesome. Mario
those
Kart
games are-
64 is awesome too.
Yeah, yeah.
They cannot make a bad Mario Kart game. I mean, that series is just great.
Yeah.
Probably the best Mario Kart. I know we're off subject now, but the best Mario Kart that I ever played was Double Dash on the GameCube. That was my
I
all-time
haven't played
favorite.
that.
I never
was
played
good.
that one either.
So you had two characters. You had a driver, and then you had a person that was riding on the back, and you could carry 2 weapons at the same time, because the driver had a weapon and the guy on the back had a weapon, and you could swap them out driving while you were
Yeah.
on the course.
Well, that's
the
awesome.
The controls were awesome. The music was awesome. The graphics were awesome. They wasn't anything bad about that game.
No doubt, man. That's awesome. Well, fellas, let's revisit this one again in the future, man, because I can go ahead and tell you we can talk all night about this, man. But I appreciate you guys getting on here tonight and sharing our thoughts, and appreciate everybody listening to it. And we'll see you next week when we talk about let's see, our favorite summer blockbusters. That's going to be a good show too. I'm looking forward to it. So see you guys next week. Bye.